Games like Hollow Knight, Super Metroid, and Ori are nestled deep into my memory as some of the best games that I've ever played. For a genre that's been evolving since the 1980s, a revolutionary experience only comes along once in a blue moon. That's because there's a blueprint of what makes a good, modern Metroidvania, and key elements or pillars that need to be present in order to rise above the competition. This isn't a list about what defines a Metroidvania, which are things like ability gating and interconnected areas, but instead, here are 6 crucial elements that take an average experience, turn it into something great, and truly define what makes a great Metroidvania. Element 1 is level design, and for better or worse, one of the largest aspects of Metroidvania is the constant backtracking. Having great level design is probably the biggest factor that separates the good from the great. This is not to be confused with world design, which is more about atmosphere and art as opposed to level design, which is how the world is constructed by an architect. By the end of most Metroidvanias, you will have to backtrack across many paths that lead you through all of the different areas that you've slowly unlocked one at a time. And if the level design is laid out smartly and is aided by good art design, then this will be a joy and not a nuisance. You will actually find enjoyment in retreading the same areas and not get frustrated that you're yet lost again. A good way to explain this is that there are games in the genre with the best level design and they do not require a map. They have maps which can be good to see which door you haven't tried yet, but once you figure out where this is located, you should just be able to get there by memory alone. This isn't due to the skill of the player, but instead is created by a truly skilled craftsman that understand how this web is weaved, how all of these areas are interconnected in a way that feels like the player has become fully immersed in the universe that they have created. Element 2, abilities. There are 2 good ways to start a Metroidvania. The first is by giving the player every single ability and power up in the game and then taking them all away, or the alternative is by starting the player at their very weakest point. These power ups and abilities, which could be done either by finding an item in the world or by an ability tree upgrade, allows you to do things that were impossible before. Areas that were extremely intriguing before because they were too high to jump or were across water that you couldn't swim in, you can now, as you can explore these areas with the help of genre classics like double jump, a water suit, wall climb, air dash, and many more. All of these abilities not only keep your interest peaked as you feel the power ramp continue to go up steadily, but they unlock areas that were inaccessible before, which is basically the equivalent of moving on to a new level. If done properly, abilities and power-ups should feel earned. If too much power is given to the player at once, it kind of removes the constant dopamine hit from gaining something new and revolutionary every so often. Element 3, world design and atmosphere. Creating an immersive world is challenging. It's a combination of art direction, score, and many other things, but the end result is that you immediately feel transported to another world, a world that feels living and breathing with you in the middle of it. The best ones are even more capable of doing it in the first few minutes and even without any words. Super Metroid, for example, conveys a sense of isolation and hopelessness, which is done by showing your ship alone in the rain with no signs of life anywhere and an eerily ethereal score. It's this atmosphere that transports you into the world of Samus, immersing you in the constant feeling of dread and hostility. Another example of how world design can be integral is with Ori and the Blind Forest. The amount of detail in the background convey a sense of scale. The forest feels epic and Ori feels like such a small and insignificant piece in this world. Moon Studios have created a Tolkien-like scale that sets the stage for the journey the protagonist is about to embark on. The amazing score by Gareth Coker amplifies the atmosphere created by the art design, and this fully immerses the player on this monumental adventure. Element 4, controls. A good Metroidvania is about getting out of the way of the player as much as possible and letting them get lost in the world, free to explore every nook and cranny. Remove frustration and allow the player to discover which areas they can go to and which ones they can't. Having a tight and responsive control scheme allows the player to quickly understand what paths they can travel and what paths will need to wait until later. If the controls feel as good as they should, the player will understand that if there's a jump and they can't make it, it's because that area is ability gated until later in the game. However, if the controls feel unresponsive in any way, then this is going to lead to frustration and is also going to lead to a broken immersion. Instead of exploring the world as they should, the player will become frustrated and unsure of where to proceed. What is obvious to the developers about where the player should go will become obtuse because rather than going where they should, they might be convinced that they can make a jump if they have the proper timing. Element 5. Story. All of the controls, art, abilities, and level design mean nothing if there isn't a good story that is also driving you to find the next area. In Hollow Knight, you are trying to figure out what happened to the kingdom of Hallownest that is now mostly void of warmth except for a few friendly NPCs. In Super Metroid, Samus is on the search for the last Metroid as it could save civilization which has been stolen by Ridley. In Ori and the Blind Forest, you need to save the forest by restoring the elements that create balance. You want to find that last Metroid, you want to restore the balance to the forest, and you want to figure out what happened to Hallownest. These are driving mechanisms. Element 6. Weapons. Gradually feeling stronger to the point of becoming almost unstoppable is essential to a good Metroidvania. They don't all work the same way though. In Metroid, for example, you are constantly adding different augments to your arm cannon, but in other games like Ori and Hollow Knight, you use the same weapon throughout the game but constantly upgrade it. The end result in both cases is that the enemies that used to terrify you are now merely minor speed bumps in the road during your backtracking. It's this power fantasy fulfillment that makes these games so rewarding. It's a similar rewarding effect that is the reason why so many people are addicted to Soulsborne games. It's the climbing of the mountain that at one point seemed insurmountable and defeating foes that seemed unbeatable. There is a large sense of accomplishment that is achieved by slowly increasing the power of the character's weapon in Metroidvanias by using the perfect drip feed. Hollow Knight, amazing world design. Super Metroid, great weapons. Ori, great story. Guacamelee, tight controls. The list goes on and on when you look at the best the genre has ever seen in nearly 4 decades of existence. You will find that the elite have all 6 of these elements present to a certain degree.